Jason Sutton, writer, actor, and you were listening to The Movie Raid.
It's time for the movie raid, and tonight's victim is actor Jason Sutton, that has played in numerous films such as Deadly Weekend, One Night of Fear, Finding Eden, amongst others. Hello.
How you doing?
Fantastic, man. So what have we been up to lately?
I've been working behind the scenes. I work on NCIS New Orleans, and I've been doing a lot of writing. And the only acting I've done is in a music video where I play the Traveler, who looks like I'm an Assassin's Creed.
You ever thought about like trying to ease on into more of the video game stuff, like in terms of doing cosplay stuff, like even more music videos or even video game promos and stuff like that too?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I'd love to either write video game dialogue, or if somebody thought my voice was video game worthy, I'd love to be a character in a video game too. I think it'd be a fun adventure.
Tell us a little bit about Deadly Weekend. Is this something that's still circulating, or is it kind of halted during this event, or can we expect?
It's available on just about every streaming service. It was my thesis film for grad school, but we ended up getting worldwide distribution. It stars Sarah Jean Underwood, who people might know from Attack of the Show, back on the G4 network, or from Playboy. She was Playmate of the Year. My producer described it as Texas Chainsaw Massacre meets Leave It to Beaver, or any sort of Full House, or any sort of sitcom, because it's more the terror of instead of like the terrible, scary Texas Chainsaw Massacre, white trash, very ugly family, it's a very all-American family, sort of teaching their kids their family traditions. And the cool thing is we shot the entire film in 9 days, which is pretty insane if you know anything about the film industry. It was almost all guys I went to school with and people I went to school with, and ended up being a really, really fun time. So it's definitely worth looking at. If you want to check it out, please do.
Is it still faring pretty well even during this current event? Do you see that kind of recognition, or even the film still, or do you still have to kind of keep it in circulation, despite that it's still being everywhere?
They actually released the sequel, Deadly Weekend 2, based off my original film, but we weren't part of the sequel somehow. Poor legal skills on my part. So it's still in circulation. I mean, it's not a huge thing, I don't think. We got a lot of recognition initially. We got a little bit of, it was initially called Zellwood. We promoted grassroots style for the first year, and that's what we did. WizardCon in Austin, Texas, some other places at Zellwood. We got it on TV as Zellwood, and like somebody's one of the top 5 videos of the day. Nothing like big or major or anything, but good free marketing. And then the distributors changed the name.
Even though a project may be a low budget or even low key, does that feeling of reliability, does it strengthen your performance or make it less responsive to in terms of just to perform at all?
I think as long as you're prepped and ready to go. I mean, on the acting side, I don't think it has a lot of effect. You got your script, you've been signed on, you do all your character research, you're ready to go. Sometimes it does mean less takes, but if you're prepped, you're ready to go. I know from the directing side, it's like an average low-budget horror movie would probably take 21, 23 days to shoot. And when you have to shoot it in 9 days, you just don't get the coverage you want. You don't get all the angles you want. You're cutting back on so many of the things you wanted to that it's sort of disappointing on some level. Like, you're never going to be able to get the film you really wanted. You're not couldn't. Maybe somebody else could. I don't want to say that it couldn't be done, but I think you always want more time, more money to make your stuff.
But there's always that uncertainty. It's always a part of the territory, too, that uncertainty whether or not that project is even going to get off its feet, or is it going to stay on the shelf, or is your reputation as that performer in the film, is that going to go any further, or is it going to expand to a different level? There's so many different possibilities here.
It's one of those things where when I talk to somebody in the film industry, and I explain that we shot the film for, $8,000 in 9 days, they understand what was accomplished, and it's at least mildly impressive that it got distribution and that it looks professional. I mean, that's what people would tell me when they saw it. They were like, oh, this looks like a real movie, which I know they meant as a compliment, but it comes up somewhat insulting, like they didn't think I could pull it off. I think to the average person that's used to seeing, a Blumhouse film or something, the lower budget, it's never going to be that level. You're not going to have 2 or 3 actors you recognize. You're not going to have a few of the other, accoutrements and giant, sky shots and crane shots. You miss out on some of those things. I think if you understand how films are made, you appreciate what was able to be done in that short amount of time and how impressive that can actually be. But I think to the average person, it's just sort of like, oh, your film looks kind of crappy.
Do you think sometimes that can be a little bit of a problem with these low budget films? Like sometimes they're not actually following these kind of steps. They're just going straight through and not really paying attention to how can we make this good within this amount of money.
Right. And it's like when you create something, it's also, you have to make those sacrifices. Like, there's no way we can afford to shoot this shot. We've got to cut down this whole B storyline or C storyline. It can't be here because we're not going to have the time or the budget to do it. So it's being accepting that that's how it is in a low budget film.
And yeah, and sometimes it's not bad to have a low budget film, because sometimes low budget films make phenomenal success. There's a lot of classic films out today. I mean, you look at Night of the Living Dead. Man, look at that budget, dude.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
And within the, like, look how many actors was in that film. It's like sometimes you have to look at it, like, look how many actors is involved in this movie. Look at the story. The story might be big, but the actors, in terms of how many actors and how many characters involved, could be very minuscule. But it all depends on where you're putting the vision at. How much of an impact do you want the audience to really know? Do you think that's also can be a problem too? How much of that can the audience get that kind of an impact from a low budget film, especially?
It's hard to say. I will say I think horror especially is much more forgiving as an audience. I think they appreciate that you went for it and they're getting something scary, something legit. It seems like the horror audience is a much more, I don't know if open is the right word, but seems like they embrace low budget far more than other genre films. And I think one thing low budget does offer you is that you get the vision you intended on some level, at least creatively. You may not be able to pull it off financially, but you don't have a bunch of producers in a studio telling you, well, you cut down the gore, you want to get this done with PG-13, or you put this actress in it from a Disney show, but you can't do this, and this because we don't want to ruin a reputation. So I think, with the low budget horror, you can kind of get closer to what you wanted to do, even though there's financial limitations allowing you not to get exactly what you wanted.
And do you think that a good strategy to perform big in small roles and then use these performances as a stepping stool for better success on larger roles? Do you think that's a good strategy for that?
I have a master's degree in film and theater, and I've worked in the industry now for about 15 years. And I was in acting class up until I started working full-time in the industry. I'd still like to get into more classes, but she always said, the acting teacher was on Broadway, and she said, you need footage is the first thing you need. Besides a good attitude and all those other things, you need footage. And you can get footage ready, whether it's, you make your own YouTube videos, whatever you do to get footage, and you keep doing movies and movies and movies, even these low-budget ones, eventually you're going to get some really good stuff of you on camera that'll help sell you to the bigger roles. It's also being on set and just the art of movie making, even on some low-budget things. Like acting is still acting. You still have the director that wants what they want. You still have your lines. You still have the schedule. So it's good just to get the reps in.
Do you think that it's best to use past roles a part of, actually as an example of your performance, or do you think it's actually a bad reflection to use your past roles as an example for these?
You have to use them, and it's sort of a weird process, but as you get bigger credits, you typically move stuff off the resume and move stuff out of the reel that doesn't quite have the same cachet, depending on what you're going for, obviously. If you're going to go in horror movies, then make sure you don't want to send them reels of what I did in a horror movie. But, when I go for bigger roles, like, I've been on Chicago PD and some of those other larger shows, and they need to see that I've done the bigger set stuff.
Sometimes it's actually good to use these past roles to help you further your performance, or taking pieces from here or there, from whatever it is you were doing, to enter that genre. It might have a better footing into that genre, or at least at ease for that most part.
Oh, yeah. I guess in every part you can get something out of. Every part you can bring something back from. Things you picked up, little things you added to the character that the director's like, oh, that was fantastic. I love that whether it's the way I'll walk or something that you can reincorporate into future roles.
Let's use an example as a Night of Fear for a moment. Your role in that, did you ever consider that particular role to use that into other horror subgenres, to almost like a resume itself? The fact is that what you're capable of, what you are able to do you actually home in on that, or do you think you can use it as a different strategy to make it better in terms of these types of roles?
I haven't been given an opportunity to do that kind of role again, but if I did, I would give them footage from One Night of Fear. Because I think, as far as the tradition of the Mike Myers, Jason, sort of silent, big, giant killer, I think it's a really good, I think it's a fun role, and I think some of that stuff just looks great, and I'm very proud of that. If I was ever, if they saw that and wanted to cast me, I would clearly send them that as like, look, I can do this. Granted, I was more of the hillbilly than the other two, but, sort of a different southern take on the silent, angry, giant killer.
I consider it like a double-edged sword. It's good and bad. It all depends of how you want to perceive it as. You want to step away from that kind of area, that's cool, but in having to be a part of that, how would you react? The fact is, if they just want you as this big brute guy and you do it well, would you say that's kind of watering down your performances as your art, or would you embrace that and actually make it something better than what it seems, aside from the Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers type of esque?
Oh, I'd love the opportunity to embrace it. I mean, the one thing, like on the first day of acting class, like what Kathy used to tell us is get a mirror. Because part of it is, I'm 6'4", I have tattoos, I have long hair, I have a beard, I used to play football, I look like a giant person. So, I'm aware of how people are going to perceive me in roles. It helps already, because, I'm already bringing the big physical presence. And then if I also bring some other things to the table, I think I could take, each time I could take a killer up a notch.
Have you ever prepared for that? Like, even though that you aren't getting that kind of work right now, have you ever thought about actually working different ways of how can you be this menacing type of character without actually making it more memorable for an existing franchise or an existing entity?
It's on a much smaller level, but I've done some shorts. Actually, with the people from One Night of Fear, I played a different sort of mean, terrible person that gets his in the end. And I've done some scenes in class where I've written, and usually in acting class, you're doing like 3 to 7 page scenes, and I've written a couple of just brutal horror ones. I mean, you end up with you find other actors in class, love horror, and you get to do some, and I've always been the killer. And been able to keep the big physical menacing presence, but also add a more psychological aspect to it and a little more intelligent. You can't tell whether the killer's intelligent or not to some extent. Sort of like Hannibal Lecter meets Jason.
Oh, yeah. Would you rely mainly on the mental aspect thing or the physical aspect of things of that?
I'd like to hope the mental, but I mean, I realize, a lot of what I'm bringing to the table is the physical.
And it could always be different despite of how menacing you look. You could always change it up in terms of the art form of it. You don't have to just simply, aside from the director wanting you to walk a certain way, but you can walk a different way in the same agreeable way that the director wants it, but you can do it in your own way and actually still make it look pretty scary or pretty stalky or however it is preceded in the horror film itself.
And of course, it depends on your character's motivation. Like, in One Night of Fear, for instance, I was just sort of a psycho killer, and I was killing because I liked killing. Another, if there's a more personal reason behind the killing or a different motivation, you obviously bring different emotions based on that.
If you rely on the mental aspect of things, sometimes it could be interfering when you're playing these kind of roles. Sometimes it could be, if you're thinking too much about it, maybe not the kind of psychotic way that you want it to be, because it might not look so great on the screen, even though maybe you thought it was in that moment, but until you actually look at it, not so well. Go ahead and plug in any websites or anything, other projects that you might be currently doing that we could possibly check out in the near future.
I'd love people to go to Amazon. My books are part of Amazon Kindle Prime, so it's free to Prime members. So you may just download the book and just read a couple chapters, see if you're into it. But if you look up the Stranger series, the first book is Grover's Mill, and the second book is Lancer. And they're sort of historical science fiction. A little bit of Philip K. Dick sort of influence sort of stuff. And then Finding Eden is another movie coming out, I think, next month. And it's coming to Amazon, iTunes, everything. I actually play kind of a good guy in that movie. The director and writer would kill me if I told this, but I'll just say this out because it's the easiest way to say it. It's sort of like Taken, but in a post-apocalyptic Taken with cannibals.
That sounds pretty crazy, man. That's pretty crazy.
And I sort of play the Liam Neeson role where I'm the action person going to get my family back and battling cannibals in the environment and all this sort of crazy stuff along the way. That also has Joseph Gad, who was in Game of Thrones. He was in Dumbo. And then it's got Tom Proctor, who's been in Guardians of the Galaxy. And just about, if you look at his resume, it's insane. The guy's been in everything, including a couple horror movies. I can't remember off the top of my head, but if you look up Tom Proctor, he's one of those guys you look at him, you'll just know exactly who he is.
And there you have it, everybody. That is actor Jason Sutton.